This is Senator John Boozman. There's a senator named John Boozman? Yes, apparently there is. It's okay if you have never heard of him. Most people haven't. Mr. Boozman is a senator from Arkansas. Interesting trivia about John Boozman. His older brother, Fay, almost won that Senate seat in Arkansas before John Boozman did. Until Fay Boozman pulled a Todd Aiken during his Senate campaign in 1998. He said that ladies secrete magical hormonal spermicide when they are raped, so you don't have to worry about rape victims ever getting pregnant. That was John Boozman's older brother, Fay. He lost that bid for the U.S. Senate seat from Arkansas in 1998, but then his little brother won the seat anyway in 2010. Senator John Boozman, just so you know, is an optometrist. He played football for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and now he's a senator. And if most of America is not aware that there is a U.S. Senator optometrist guy named John Boozman, then most of America is definitely not aware that this guy is also a senator. You recognize him? No? That's okay. He's not exactly a household name. His name is Mike Johans. He's a senator, too. Mike Johans is a lawyer. He went to St. Mary's University of Minnesota, and then he got a law degree at a school called Creighton. Here's another one for you. Do you know me? Do you know me? No, you don't. You don't know me, likely. You don't know. No, I'm Richard Burr. And before Senator Richard Burr became a U.S. Senator from North Carolina, he played football for the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and he was in a fraternity, and then he distributed law equipment. This guy, Pat Toomey, also a senator. Yeah, who knew, right? Ever seen him before? To get to the Senate, Pat Toomey worked at Chemical Bank, and then he worked at an investment bank called Morgan Grenfell. He's a Harvard guy. Pat Toomey. On your average day of news, your average day of life in America, the names and the basic bios of run-of-the-mill senators like this, they are the furthest thing from most people's minds. Who they are, how they do their jobs. On most days, those things do not make a ripple. And then there are days like today, when these four men really deserve to be very, very famous. More famous than they've ever been before in their whole lives. Right now, American troops are fighting the longest war in American history. Until last year, American troops were fighting that longest war in American history alongside a second war, too, in Iraq. Two of the longest wars in American history fought at the same time by a population of troops that makes up less than 1% of the American population. Think about that. We have put an incredible burden on a proportionally tiny sliver of our population. And they did not get to those wars on their own. They didn't start those wars. The government sent them to do that work in our name, right? A grateful nation and all that. Well, now Americans coming home from those wars have an unemployment rate that is 35% higher than the national rate of unemployment. Everybody is having a hard time in this job market, right? But veterans coming home from these wars have been at war. They have been doing things at their job for their deployment that employers may not understand on a resume. Kandahar and Baghdad don't exactly easily compare to the other addresses that employers are seeing on people's application for work. And so the unemployment rate for vets is significantly higher, 35% higher than it is for the rest of the country. But that disadvantage in the marketplace for jobs, that disadvantage that vets are at, that disadvantage is something that we did as a country. The government, in our name, sent these folks abroad, and now they are coming home. And it is these guys you have never heard of before, like Senator Boozman and Senator Johans, Senator Burr and Senator Toomey, who today decided that the country doesn't actually need to make good by veterans on this particular problem that we as a country created for our veterans. Today, Republicans in the Senate filibustered the bipartisan Veterans Jobs Corps bill that was totally paid for and totally bipartisan. In the vote, 5 Republicans did cross party lines and sided with all the Democrats who voted for it, but the Republicans still blocked it with a filibuster. And so we have no Veterans Jobs Corps bill, thanks mostly to these guys, the lawyer, the optometrist, the football player fraternity guy, and the investment banker. These 4 Republican senators all wrote parts of the bill. The Democrats said, we want this to be bipartisan. What do you Republicans want to be in the Veterans Jobs Corps bill so that you can vote for it, so we can do this together? And the Republicans wrote most of the bill. These 4 superstars all added their stuff that they wanted in the bill. They contributed Republican components to the legislation. What they suggested was included in the legislation. They got what they wanted, and then they voted no. If I could write their names in the sky, I would write their names in the sky. There is no plan B for a Veterans Jobs Corps bill. They killed it. They cannot try again for it until next year. Joining us now is former U.S. Congressman from Pennsylvania, Patrick Murphy. Mr. Murphy is also a former Army paratrooper and a teacher of constitutional law at West Point. He has the distinction of having been the first Iraq War veteran to have served in Congress. Mr. Murphy, thank you for being here. It's nice to see you.
It's great to be with you, Rachel, even though it's under these circumstances.
Yeah, I'll tell you, have been monitoring this legislation for a while, watching it in the Senate. We did not, on this show, put it on TV before tonight because, honestly, everybody thought it was a foregone conclusion that it would pass because it was such a bipartisan thing. I thought we might end up covering a fight over it in the House, but it seemed like a done deal in the Senate, and then it died. I mean, nobody expects much from this Congress, but haven't we been able to expect some minimum willingness to come together on the issue of veterans?
You know, Rachel, today is an absolute disgrace. The Senate should be ashamed of themselves. The fact is that every 80 minutes a veteran in America commits suicide. Every 80 minutes. And the least we could do is these men and women fight for us overseas. The last thing they need to do is come back home and fight to get jobs. This Jobs Corps bill was allowing them to become cops and firefighters back here in our own communities. And these guys stopped it. They should be ashamed. I don't know how they look themselves in the mirror. It's a disgrace.
We contacted those four senators who I described there, Senators Burr and Johans and Toomey and Boozman. We contacted their offices today, and the ones who would talk to us basically said that they weren't voting against veterans on this. They said they were just voting against a rule that would have needed to be waived in order for the whole Senate to vote on the actual bill. In your experience in Congress, does Congress usually let rules fights derail legislation that they otherwise really actually want to pass?
Not at all. These guys are looking for excuse after excuse after excuse. The fact is this, is they're trying to obstruct any type of movement or any type of accomplishment, even if it's a bipartisan accomplishment, just because there's an election 6.5 weeks away. They're pissed off because Barack Obama talked about this in his State of the Union address this past year. They came together, Democrats, Republicans in the Senate. These guys co-authored the bill, and then they shut it down because they're 6.5 weeks away. I mean, it's blatant partisan politics. And this is why America hates the Senate and hates the Congress. And if people aren't pissed off about this, when these veterans, over 225,000 of them are unemployed, we need to do all we can to come together as a country to serve them, to give them an opportunity. You know, it's not just a job, it's their dignity to come back home and get a job. And these guys stood in the way of it, and it's a disgrace.
Patrick, one of the groups that is fought over as we're this close to an election, especially in the swing states, especially like your home state of Pennsylvania, are veterans. Veterans' votes are seen as not just symbolically crucial, but literally crucial in terms of these narrow state margins. Are veterans, and I know you're involved in a lot of different veterans groups, are veterans following issues like this closely? Is this sort of thing on veterans' political radar when they're making their decisions about how to vote?
Yes and no. I mean, these veterans, you know, they're going back and they're worried about getting jobs, and the ones that have jobs are trying to keep the jobs and their family and everything else, all the other life challenges that they have to deal with. So they're not following it as closely as you and I are following it. But the simple fact is that, you know, for so long, decade after decade, the Republicans are like, look, we're strong, we fight these wars. Yeah, well, you know, we lost our focus on going after bin Laden, who murdered 3,000 innocent Americans on 9/11. To go over to an unnecessary war in Iraq. We spent $3 trillion in Iraq, lost over 4,000 men and women, tens of thousands lose limbs, tens of thousands have PTSD or TBI, traumatic brain injury. And then these knuckleheads who send them overseas, send us into war, don't want to take care of these veterans when they come home. I mean, that's the cost of war. We need to make sure we give them the opportunity. We need to expand things like the GI Bill. And to do it just so President Obama or Democrats and Republicans can't say, hey, we have an accomplishment every once in a while, is just beyond me. I just can't get over the fact that these men in the Senate turn their back on veterans who are in desperate need right now. It's just un-American.
Former U.S. Congressman, Army combat veteran Patrick Murphy. You know, it is a powerful interview when what I have written in large letters on my script next to your name is knuckleheads. Thank you for giving me that. I needed a term that I could say on television about this. I appreciate it, Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks.